where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts, unabridged, the history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
From WBRN Radio, traveling on the Boston Red Network, our episode Friday Jobber on the 7th of February 2020. Very interesting here. We have some lineup changes here. The Numbers Man, the episode This Week in Economics, part of the network here at Boston Red, will be this weekend. We missed 1 week. We'll consolidate the news. Part of this is the chaos created by Iowa. Now, another note here, we do have a program on Iowa that we are doing on the political channel, Boston Red. It is tentatively entitled A Mess Called Iowa. We may change that. And also on our technical channel, which is the Open Source Report, we'll have a more tech-laden version of it, and we'll talk about other tech news, open source software, open source hardware. And one of the things we'll do on that channel is we'll make the argument that election software, such as the debacle from Shadow, should be open sourced. Now we'll make that argument there as we go with it. We have some polling here, and also we have a tentative call. The AP announced today they would not attempt to call the debacle in Iowa, known as the Iowa caucuses. We at the Boston Red Network, WBRN, is projecting that when all the machinations, confetti fall to the ground, that the junior senator from Vermont, Bernard Sanders will be the winner of the Iowa caucuses. We base that on his actual vote turnout in both the first and second choice ballots from what we know as of now. So we'll leave it at that at the present time. If we need to go revisit it, we will go revisit it. Again, this is where we have, now these are delegate counts here, but basically it's at 26 and 26 for Bernie Sanders and Little Petey of South Bend. In second place is Elizabeth Warren, who has pulled ads from TV stations in Nevada and in South Carolina to preserve capital. In fourth place is Joe Lunchbox Biden. This count, let's see, with 97% here. We have Joe, we'll get to that in a minute, but basically at about 15%. And in fifth place is Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Now there's roughly 800 to 1,000 votes between the two. That is Joe Lunchbox Biden, and Amy Klobuchar. Fairly close there. And the head of the DNC, Tom, what is his name? Perez, has asked the Iowa people basically to do a recount. Now, in a caucus situation, it's a little bit harder to do it, but they supposedly have a paper trail. But what this has done is moved the spotlight to New Hampshire, which is a primary, and that primary will occur, and then we'll have something. But in the last few years, the New Hampshire and Iowa primaries have not been decisive. Now, in 2016, it was a different situation in that you had Bernie Sanders taking on Hillary the Monster Clinton. And Hillary the Monster Clinton at the time had the superdelegates, which basically almost gave her the nomination before the race ever started. And a number of states were stolen from Bernie. Bernie, again, within 10 for 2 attempts of winning Iowa. He won New Hampshire, and it was on, but it was stolen from him out in Nevada and several other states. So again, we had this situation. Various commentators have talked about the similarities to 216. Well, they're not, because you have a big monstrous type campaign, the elephant in the room, by the name of Bloomberg. He is waiting. He's not in New Hampshire. He's not in the early primaries. Doesn't need to be there. Has already spent $100 million. He's doing TV. That's his beginning game and his end game. He is a moderate, like a Little Petey. But the difference there primarily is Bloomberg is not talking religion, and Little Petey is talking that in his small-time military service as an analyst. So he got him the nickname of CIA Pete. Thus, these so-called moderate candidates are kind of fenced off, so to speak. One of the situations we'll have to after New Hampshire, that a number of these candidates, including Liz Warren, Joe Lunchbox Biden, will have their futures determined for them by funding. If they cannot get the funding, their campaigns will start to disappear. Liz Warren, I think, wants to at least get to Super Tuesday. And she can do that by preserving money, because once again, South Carolina is not her place. That is one of the primaries traditionally dominated by followers of O.J. Simpson, shorthand meaning African Americans. Biden had that sewn up. It's a little bit more tenuous now. And it's very interesting. In South Carolina, of all people, Tom Steyer was in double digits there, and he raked up some donations. We don't know if he bought those or how he got them, but anyway, he has some momentum down there. He is one of these so-called middle-of-the-road, moderate type Democrats on the scene, billionaire. Will he try to pull a Little Petey? Little Petey is not going to do very well in South Carolina, and Little Petey knows that. But on to Nevada, very difficult in Nevada there, because that's the union operation, and Joe Biden looks to get something done. Now, part of the problem here, if Bloomberg starts, he's already in the double digits, starts to show up after Super Tuesday, who will have the money to take him on? Period. Bernie will. Liz Warren, there's a question mark there. And then we wonder what happens to Amy Klobuchar? Well, part of the problem Amy Klobuchar's had is Joe Lunchbox Biden and Little Petey of South Bend. If those two disappear, she has more of a clear path, providing she can stick around to Super Tuesday. And a lot of this depends on a perception. At least Amy Klobuchar is being mentioned by the national press. This is the same national press that does not like to mention the name of Bernie Sanders. They would like to forget about Bernie Sanders. And on our special program, the mess called Iowa, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk also about shadow and who was behind the shadow. It was not Lamont Cranston at all. It was cohorts of Hillary the Monster Clinton, and they were such a shadowy organization that Motherboard organization, part of Vice, VICE, they were one of the ones to look at this application. We'll get into it and into some of the technical aspects of the application. Basically, the application was not tested properly. Being in software development, we know how to test. And not only was it not tested properly, these are software testings that you do, but it was also not tested by the user. Many of the users tried to deploy it on election night. That's something you never do. And in some rural areas, the connections were tenuous, and at the same time, there are all other kinds of problems in Iowa. One article I seen recently, followers of DJ Trump were calling up some of the phone lines. At first, it was even harder to get in. There were not enough phone lines. This is from a logistics situation. You always have available phone lines. You know that when you're using the type of application they used, was dodgy, you have to have your phone bank ready. And the Democratic Party in Iowa was just not ready for prime time. And now that, coupled with the debacle at the Congress, the impeachment process of DJ Trump, the only bright spot out of that operation was that Willard Romney made history. He's a senator from Utah, former governor of the Commonwealth, Massachusetts. There is the predecessor to Obamacare was Romneycare, and it's still in the Commonwealth working well. Anyway, nonetheless, he voted on one article for the impeachment of DJ Trump. So that gave the numbers there, and I have those down. What was it, 48, 52, or 53, whatever those numbers were, and thus a little bit of light. And then, of course, when we finish up there, one additional vote, he voted on that. But as far as Susan Collins, Murkowski, and those people were concerned, she did not show up. How will this affect her race? Looking at it here, the first vote that was Article 1 of impeachment was 53 to 47. And, whoops, I'm sorry about that. These are different votes. Okay, let's see if we can get this down here. These were the amendments here, and let me see if we have these, what they turned out. Anyway, it would have been, from my memory now, and I have to go to it, the votes were, was 52 to 48, the first vote, and the next vote was, would have been, 53 to 40. I'm going to have to do this on the week that was, because I'm not looking at the right, looking at the wrong slip of paper here. That's what happens when you have numerous slips of paper that you're looking at here to get the votes right. Don't want to be dodgy like Iowa. Let me just look at my others here. I got these numerous cheat sheets that we have around here, and unfortunately, not the right cheat sheet falls out here. That's not the right one, Iowa. Anyway, the Romney vote, his vote, anyway, on the back to the articles, yes, that did make a difference of one vote there, and that was the end of so-called bipartisanship. But the story here is Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski, and they did think at one time that Lamar Alexander, who is retiring from Tennessee, perhaps would vote, but that was a pipe dream, and it never materialized. And we've seen this before, and of course that'll be something that will have to be settled in the election coming up, as far as to where Susan Collins is or Susan Collins is not. We'll be looking at that polling. Anyway, nonetheless, I tell you, this is almost like in the old days, the old law office, envelopes here, slips of paper. Anyway, so we'll just sedge on here. We'll go to the people from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, and we always remember Heber who was killed by white supremacists in the city of Charlottesville, Virginia. Nonetheless, writing here, the crystal ball. Kyle Klondike is here, and this particular crystal ball was volume 18, issue 7. I'm just looking at it here. This is Larry Sabato's shop. The key points from this article, they call theirs the Iowa Chaos preview of July. Well, that would be if the convention is what they call a brokered convention. In other words, none of the candidates have a winning a majority on the first round. Could happen because of Bloomberg, depending on who stands there as of this writing, and we've cleared that up. The ultimate outcome, there is no outcome there. We've projected Bernie Sanders of Vermont as the winner, and AP has decided they could not do any projection here because of the outcome is so dodgy. Anyway, nonetheless, second one, Joe Biden's push showing probably forecloses the possibility of him winning the nomination quickly. Now, they leave that open. He could be out there. Lunchbox Biden, the odds of a rare or contested convention probably went up, although there's still time the race to sort itself out. There's no doubt about that. But after the Iowa debacle, much larger than expected vote count featuring confusion, opaque rules, that produced a mixed and divisive outcome. That sums up the Iowa caucus, first event of the Democratic nominating season. The Iowa debacle and its muddied results seem to make a contested convention at least a little more likely. After just a few votes left the count, we won't get into this. Bernie Sanders had the most votes from actual caucus participants in the first round of voting, the closest thing we have to a true popular vote in Iowa. So, We go to the other people here, Liz Warren, who's already running out of dough, and Joe Lunchbox Biden and Amy Klobuchar. Why, and incidentally, they will have a debate in New Hampshire, and we'll get to that in a minute here. We're looking at some polling there. Early caucus and primaries do not award that many delegates, no doubt about this. As of this writing, no one has dropped out of the race following Iowa, even a candidate. And this is the bias we've seen against Amy Klobuchar, like Klobuchar, whom competitive but apparently fifth place finish in that state. She's long targeted. Will trudge on to New Hampshire, where she's already there, and she's making a more, in our opinion, a more convincing case there than she did in Iowa, and she needs to continue to do that. Biden's performance foreclosed one possible outcome to this primary season, a quick victory. Well, we never thought that anyway. Had he won Iowa, well, he was about, 4 places from doing that, and perhaps winning 3 of the first contests. Possibility he has of winning something in South Carolina, and maybe in Nevada, and maybe not. But he does need to be in one of those 3 jump seats out of Nevada. It's easy to note, as we and many others did the months in advance, that overly European Iowa, New Hampshire present Democratic challenges for national polling leader. Biden is leading candidate among African Americans. He is indeed, but Bernie is bringing up the rear and in a hurry. And little Petey, you can forget him. It's another thing to actually see the universally known Biden getting only 15% of the first round votes and apparently finishing 4th. But it seems to put a lots into Iowa, came away empty-handed. New Hampshire is not very promising for him either. Well, New Hampshire and Iowa were not even very promising for the monster. She almost lost Iowa, and she in fact did, some people said, and she lost New Hampshire, so basically the same thing is sailed on. Although the Granite State sometimes zigs when the Hawkeye State zags, there's a real danger that Biden, who is already running low on dough, peeds out in the next few weeks. He needs a big win in South Carolina, but again, that is a party that is like Iowa. The difference there is it follows O.J. Simpson are there in South Carolina. It's a more conservative. I think we made a comment, observation that it is a more conservative Democratic operation, and so is Iowa. Bloomberg looms large, replacement for Biden as a champion of the center-left establishment part of the Democratic Party. He'll be a champion of the center, not the left. Anyway, maybe, although his non-existent support amongst African-American voters could render him an afterthought following New Hampshire. New Hampshire seems like a win, must-win for both. It's not. Bernie's going to do well there. Little Petey is doing okay. It seems fair to say that Little Petey was the only candidate who really seemed to outperform pre-caucus expectations. Well, it was a poll. What was that poll? Of the rural and suburban areas of Iowa that actually showed Little Petey ahead. Very interesting poll indeed of Bernie Sanders, and that was the only poll actually out of Iowa, and we looked at it and thought about maybe using a slide rule model to see where Little Petey was going. But we did not do that, unfortunately, and sometimes that happens. However, if New Hampshire doesn't help the winner of the field, the race remains mothballed into and through March, a delegates-rich contest, no doubt. Now it's going to be very, very big. Now they move on to the House here. Key takeaways: Democrats remain favorites to hold on to the House, but it's hard to imagine what Republicans' path would be. DJ Trump is a key, and he's at 49% now. A highly nationalized presidential campaign that DeVos, the roster of Democrats in Clinton's won, and Trump won in marginal, Clinton won seats, would represent the best possible outcome. Well, interesting. So in other words, these are some ratings here of some Democrat. California 10, Josh Holder there, likely Democrat there. Diaz, Ballard in Florida, safe Republican there, has been around for a while. Mass in another Florida, safe Republican, likely. Booth, now that is out of Illinois, downstate, safe Republican there. Minnesota 7, Wahlberg from likely the safe Republican there. Michigan 7, sorry about that. Minnesota 1, that's the one I was thinking about. Hagedorn leans Republican, likely Republican, leans Republican. And Pete Stuba, that's Minnesota 8, that used to be a, what's his name, used to have that district for many years up in northern Minnesota. And this guy, his first term, they call it safe Republican, Minnesota 8th there. Now the other one, the Minnesota 1, that was where the current governor of Minnesota was at one time. Very close race down there. Now Minnesota 8th up there, Oberstar is one I'm thinking about, was up there. And New York 19, that is Delgado, that leans Democrat there. And Republican district, Bolison, that's in Ohio, likely Republican there. Joyce, that's another, that was 12-14, safe Republican. Pennsylvania, Fitzgerald, from a toss-up to lean Republican there. Kelly, that's another Pennsylvania, 16, safe Republican. Leslie Fletcher, she leans a Democrat from likely there. Ben McAdams out in Utah 4, leans Republican. That used to be Love's district, and prior to that was Matson, a conservative Democrat. Anyway, likely Democrat. Washington 8, that is Kim Sheree, I think it is. And again, a special election in Wisconsin 7, safe Republican there. So that is some of it. The House of Politicos, Jake Sherman stated a story last week on Republican money troubles. Yeah, there's been a lot of unexplained. Sherman quoted both the House Minority Leader McCarthy and the Congressional Chair Emmer of Minnesota 6 expressing concern about fundraising. Not a lot of being in there. Republicans have kind of pretty much given up on the House. Their money is on the Senate, trying to keep old man McConnell in there. House majority, the Democrats outside House majority pack in a year with $38 million to $28 million on hand over the Republicans, but don't count that out yet. House elections are about more than money. Republicans are not favored to win the House, but it doesn't take much imagination to figure out how they could. Long-term national trends point to increase in straight ticket voting. The winning power of the incumbency, despite losing the national popular vote in 2016. DJ Trump carried 226 of 435 congressional districts that would be in place for this year. This includes newly drawn districts in North Carolina. Democrats hold 30 districts that Trump carried, while Republicans hold only 5 that Hillary Clinton carried. The current rating favors the Democrats to win at least 3 of the 5 current Clinton-won GOP districts there. Now, this is one interesting ad. The Republicans got Van Drew, but Van Drew turned to Republican. He was a Democrat, but he was dodgy. All put together, Republicans likely will need at least 20 or so current Democratic seats to get the magic number of 218 seats. For a majority, Trump won districts held by Democrats. provided a path to reaching that number. Republicans could also have some targets in marginal Clinton districts, perhaps. This reality helps explain why, despite Trump's weak approval ratings, have gotten better, though his approval ratings has been up a little lately, and well, up a hell of a lot. Anyway, have rallied around him. They have best chance to win a majority back if Trump maximizes his election potential in November. In other words, a landslide election. There's very little electoral daylight between House Republicans and the president. Well, we look at that. We also analyze here at Crescent Analytics 335 House districts. Nonetheless, Republican outcry groups have been hitting Trump district on impeachment. Spending has spurred some vulnerable members like Anthony Brandischi. He's in New York 22. Joe Cunningham, that is in South Carolina, want to defend themselves on the airwaves. The danger for Republicans that Trump caters in the fall and drags GOP down with him. Well, that's true. But at this point, House Republicans would be in the minority, just like they are now. No doubt about that, but I wouldn't bet on anything these days. It's much more likely to change in the midterm than in presidential election. Yeah, presidential elections is when everyone usually gets out there. That is a different situation there. Now, in northwest Wisconsin, that is where Sean Duffy was. Resigned. There's been little indication that Democrats can make a strong play for the district in a May 12th special election. Last week, now this is the Houston district out there, closely watched district. In a special election, the Democrats lost that one. I thought they might pick it up. 58 to 42 outperformed Trump. Trump was 53 to 43 in that district, but that's traditionally been a Republican district. Now, this Diaz Ballard, he's been around a long time, and David Joyce, he's Ohio 14, although none of them have hard races in bad territory there. And this is Booth, Walburn, and Stuber, and Mike Kelly. Whole seats in some instances contain ancestral Democratic turf. Well, yeah, it was ancestral. I guess they could put that. Oberstar had that district, that's Minnesota 8, for a very, very long time. And recently, they used to have this fellow that a collection of farm centers used to run there, and of course he lost out, and he's no longer running. But they've been in and out. They had another fellow that was there, was one term, I think it was, an airplane, a pilot that was a stay-at-home type, and his wife moved to New England, and he hasn't been seen since either. We get his name right now. But there's been various characters around. We'll go on past this. Fitzgerald, he's what, P1, occupies a perennial swing seat. This is Bucks County. This is in greater Philadelphia. But he survived 2008, has not drawn in a strong opponent. Nationalization could be his undoing if Trump's 2-point deficit in the current district expands. Pennsylvania is very tricky. Trump, a lot of it will depend on who the candidate is. It's a command and control state, and we'll see. Period. This Jim Herndon, he's Minnesota 1. That's down southern Minnesota. This Dan Freehan is back running again. It was a very close election down there. And Lizzie Fletcher, that's what, Texas 7, from likely Democrat, of a spirited challenge from veteran Wesley Hunt, whom the Republicans are champion as a high-quality recruit. He still has to navigate a primary. So a lot of these characters have primaries out there, and we'll see the fate with Representative Harley Ruda, I suppose. He's in California 48, Lucy McBath, Georgia 6, and this is one I'm not familiar with, Cindy Axney, she evidently supported, was it Biden or Klobuchar? Hey, one of those. She is in Congressional District 3 in Iowa. And several of these, Underwood, don't know anything about her. Tom Malinsky in Jersey, Lurie, Democrat there. And one of our favorites, Abigail Spangenberger. She's in Pennsylvania 7, major, former CIA type. May be a deciding factor in the race. Republicans will need to knock off several of them in order to win the House. We're not going to knock off all of these. Very hard to do. McAdams, he mentions him. Jim Matson was a guy we were thinking of. Sabato liked Matson. But I will say we'll have a special on Willa Romney. Stood up there. We'll replay. I'll tell you about how we're going to do it here from a production standpoint, being the producer. Anyway, we'll have his little speech and say a few words. It'll be short, and across the network we go. Now, Doug Jones did vote to impeach, and so did Mr. Manchin of West Virginia. So we'll see how, but Manchin's been around longer. Doug Jones was in a tenuous situation no matter what he did. Let's look at some polling here, particularly at some New Hampshire polling, and we'll see where we are. And this is 97% of it here. Literally at 26.2 tenths and 26.1 tenths was where Bernie is, but Bernie had more votes there. Elizabeth Warren still at 18.2. Joe Biden is at 15.8, and Amy Klobuchar is at 12.2. This is LA Times. This is the latest with 97. They're more than 97 now, so we keep going along here. Let me just pull this one out here, see if we can get this up here. This is from a JMC Enterprise in Louisiana, and this was with 86%. The 2020 election started off with a whimper, certainly not a bang. Not only was a last-minute poll bizarrely canceled, that was the Iowa poll. We don't know what happened there yet, just before it was publicly released, but one day after the caucusing, we only have partial knowledge of the election results from the Iowa caucus on the Democratic side. However, there are some preliminary takeaways that can be alternatively given now. This is why we're here. 1, good. Not record turnout. Thus far, 86% of the precincts are in. Well, now there's 90-some%. We know so far that 158,000 people voted. This is extrapolates to about 181,000. Final, I see what he's doing here. Turnout, well, this is healthy turnout, just above the 171,000 who voted in 2016 side. This all-time record was 238,000. That was when Barack Obama was running. Was historic and was not surpassed. Now, these people I have a lot of respect from. They are one of the organizations that did exploit yes, similar to technology to our slide rule that came out there. Anyway. Who won? Is it a split decision? The raw vote shows Bernie Sanders receiving 37,989 votes. That's not PD at 36,000. There are more votes than this now. I won't get into these, but if we look at Joe Biden, and this is it's gotten much closer now. He was at 23,000, 15%, and Amy Klobuchar basically at 13% here. At 19,000, she is within, evidently now, about 800 votes there. What really counts in terms of delegate selection is delegate equivalence, candidates who in individual precincts do not attain 15% of the precinct votes are deemed not viable. This, his or her votes do not count in the final totals for that precinct. That vote is reallocated to someone else. In this scenario, equivalency metric, Buttigieg leads Bernie 27-25. Elizabeth Warren got 18, Biden 16, and Amy Klobuchar 12. Now, this does bring some light. Now, hopefully they'll. And number 3, 5 tickets to New Hampshire, given that Iowa results are incomplete and they have been scrapped today. There's no real clear winner of Iowa, as attention now shifts to New Hampshire, the primary in 7 days. The 5 candidates there with double-digit supports arguably shows some semblance of viability for the next 7 days. And 4, the two halves of the Democratic Party. They're really two electoral swimming lanes in the Democratic Party contest. The liberal lane, that's interesting how they do this. As with Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, they got 43% of the vote. The moderate lane with Joe Lunchbox Biden, Little Petey, and Amy Klobuchar, they received 49. The remaining remaining 8 went to Andrew Yang, Tom Steyer, and other candidates there. In the short term, this party splits benefits Bernie Sanders, since he's the only has only one competitor in his swimming lane, and she's not swimming well. And the moderate lane, well, they'll consolidate there. And 5, we only just began, since Iowa is a caucus state. The results aren't necessarily a harbinger of the future. For one thing, the primary electorate are a large and broader spectrum of a party base than caucuses are. Plus, Iowa and New Hampshire are, again, they mention this, nearly all European, even on the Democratic side. The change starts in Nevada. They have the caucuses, and in South Carolina, the primary there. Plus, Tom Steyer and Bloomberg are essentially placing their bets on Super Tuesday. States, that'll be on March the 3rd. Iowa's winners and losers. The winner, of course, Bernie Sanders, although he really needs a blowout to clear the dominating field. That's in the liberal swimming lane. I'd call it the progressive lane. Elizabeth Warren, although she really needs a win somewhere. And Little Petey and Amy Klobuchar, although it's more correct to say her judgment day has been postponed to New Hampshire, much like a Marco Vegas Rubio. Well, her judgment day is not necessarily in New Hampshire. She can, they say, go into Nevada and into South Carolina. And on to Super Tuesday. If I were Amy's campaign, I would figure out a way to limp in. Who is the loser? Joe Lunchbox Biden, the quintessential incumbent. When considering his political resume, his 4th place finishing is hardly an exhibit of strength. And since Bernie is well positioned at this point to win New Hampshire next week, Biden would have his moment to shine until he gets to Nevada. So that's Joe Lunchbox Biden. I thought we'd bring that in. And now let's do some real polling here. We'll save the American, what is it here? Anyway, we'll get to it later here. Is a novel about Latinos from a woman named Cummings. American Dirt. We have to get American Dirt. Anyway, let's get to some polling here. This is today's polling out of New Hampshire. This is the Globe, the Boston Globe and Suffolk poll. Has Bernie up by 6. Then comes Little Petey at 19 and Biden at 12, Warren at 11, and Amy Klobuchar is in single digits at 6. Kelsey Gabbard's got to see how this turns out. And then we have Emerson, that's out of Boston. They're polling as Biden up by 10, 31 to 21 with Little Petey. And then comes Warren and Biden at 12, and Amy Klobuchar. Well, the good thing here, at least in Emerson polling, They're statistically tied up. Elizabeth Warren, Amy, Biden. We'll see where that goes. Now, that was an Emerson poll. Now we go into Wednesday's poll. These are tracking polls, incidentally. What do we have here? We had Bernie up by 9, and then came Biden and Little Petey, and Warren at 10 there. This is now the Globe's poll and Emerson poll. Bernie was up by 15. Hasn't changed a lot. Dropped by 5. Anyway, Biden at 13, Little Petey at 17, Warren at 11. And these two polls, the two Emerson polls, basically have Warren and Amy Klobuchar tied up. That looks good for Amy Klobuchar. Now let's run over here. I think we can get to the Emerson poll here and then take a quick looky at it. Okay, this is a tracking poll of third night. The headline from here is Little Petey gets an Iowa bounce. Bernie maintains his lead. This is just now tracking poll. With a bounce out of Iowa there, his numbers increased from 12 to 17 on Tuesday night. This separates him from the field. Bernie's whose number held at 32, and Biden at 13, and Amy Klobuchar at 13, and Elizabeth at 11. And Elizabeth Warren same place. Elizabeth Warren needs to do better there. Held their support. Buttigieg, he gained 5. Elizabeth Warren lost 2, and Amy Klobuchar lost 1, according to this. And from Dr. Kimball, explained Bernie may have gotten his bounce yesterday at this Iowa poll. Gave his numbers for the third run status. Front runner status, New Hampshire numbers increased from 29 to 30. Just a 3% bounce, not much of one. The trend found in the Emerson poll tracking pulled very strong from young voters. Amongst voters under 50, he leads 42, followed by Buttigieg, only 11% there. Gabbard and Warren at 10. And 50 and older, he holds a smaller lead with 23, followed by Buttigieg there. And Amy Klobuchar got 13 out of that deal. Holds a strong lead amongst very liberal voters, 54% there. Following him is 19 there. And 11 there, somewhat liberal. Bernie Sanders at 35% there, followed by Little Petey at 19, Warren at 14, and again we have Warren and Klobuchar tied up together. Makes a case for Klobuchar to continue on. Warren's going to have more money problems there. Majority of voters, 57%, says very important factor is to select a candidate that can beat DJ Trump. Plurality of 42% of voters chose Sanders, followed by 32. This is 32 who chose Biden. 10% indicated they believe Little Petey would be the nominee. And Biden is still ticking up there. And if we go, let's go to St. Ansel's here. This is a poll of St. Ansel's out of St. Ansel's College in New Hampshire. Results from the St. Ansel College based on 491 registered voters in New Hampshire. And it's the confidence level is 4.4% there for you comp types. Anyway, Bernie Sanders leads amongst men, 25%. Voters age 18 to 34, 38%. Very liberal, 35%. With college degrees, 20%. On the seacoast, 24%. Biden leads amongst women, 19% of the vote. Over 55 with 26, conservatives 29, somewhat liberal 20%, with advanced education 21. Voters in the Lake region 27%, and the Merrimack Valley 21% there. Sanders' rise is testament in part to the fact that he that hard campaigning in New Hampshire doesn't persuade voters, although no campaigning has been as effective at getting votes as grassroots contacts. As Warren, Sanders is close behind with 12% of voters reporting meeting the candidate at an event. 56% being contacted by Sanders' campaign, either by phone or door knocking. This campaign's worked hard to get momentum at the right time. Bernie's people have been knocking doors all over New Hampshire. So, they appear to be coalescing around the two top candidates, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Biden has reversed his decline of last fall, but Sanders has posted a remarkable 10-point gain since the last poll. Amy Klobuchar surged in a virtual tie to fourth place with Liz Warren. Now, this is kind of interesting. She could be a replacement for Liz Warren. We're watching very, very closely. 69% of Bernie's supporters are firmly committed to him, an advantage over Biden at 41% there. Andrew Yang supporters are more committed at 81%, while 64% of Biden supporters are extremely interested in the election, whereas only 50% of Bernie's. Something a little different from Ansel here. We've gotten them before out here, and this is basically where we are. If we get the current at 19% for Bernie, this is in February here, and in November of 2019, 9-10, so he's up there at 16. Joe Biden has 9 in this. He was at 24. Little Petey is higher than he's ever been at 14. Elizabeth Warren is at 15. He was at 10 and 12. Amy Klobuchar is she started out with 2% in New Hampshire, then 3%, 6%. Now she's at 11%. She's up at the right time. Institute of Politics here. Favorability ratings. Little Petey is up there at 72%. Bernie's at 67%. Warren at 64. Not very much difference here. Amy at 57%. Part of that is name recognition there with some of these people. So we look at the clear thing here of where they are now. Bernie's at 19. Biden and Bernie are at 19 in this poll. And little Petey is at 14. Amy is at 11, and so is Liz Warren. But they've come a long ways. Liz Warren in September was at 25%, and Amy Klobuchar was at only 3%. Little Petey was at 10%. Bernie was at 11%, and Biden was at 24%. Now he's 19%. So there's been a 4% change in Biden, 10% change in Bernie, and that does it on that. Let's see what else we got going here. We won't do American Dirt not this time around. We probably will go into this with Nate Silver here, and we'll get that on the special program. We'll get into where Nate is on our special program coming up here. Latest from Iowa. Well, this is not the latest, but this is from the 538. Results from the continue to trickle in. They only had 87. We now at 62 there. But if we looked at it from a number of these people here and where they are, the final alignment here. First alignment was 24%. Their final alignment is 26 and 26. And yeah, we look at all these. Amy Klobuchar at first alignment is 13, 12, and 12. And Biden at 15, 14, and 16 there. So, really, the initial voter preferences tallied. Bernie Sanders now leads little Petey 24 to 22. That's why we call it there. By final voting purposes, Sanders currently leads little Petey by 6/10 of the vote. 26.1 to 25.5. Buttigieg leads Bernie 27 to 25, the same as this morning. Now these delegate equivalents. Well, we're never going to get to that. This thing is contested, folks out there. There's no doubt about that. Looking at some of the counties here. And I'm not familiar with the counties here, so we'll have to get back to that. But again, Sanders also winning, going by past realignment vote share of the free congressional districts. So Bernie won 3 of the 4 congressional districts. Final alignment this is the Iowa 1st, Iowa 2nd, Iowa 3rd, and Iowa 4th. And Bernie won all those except for Iowa 3rd, I suppose. The only exception is Iowa 3rd, where Buttigieg is 4 points ahead. Likely strength in upper middle class Des Moines suburbs, such as those in Dallas County. So Little Petey is winning in the suburban and rural locations. That's why that one poll that we had was dynamic in itself. Let me just roll along here. And I think these are, We'll incidentally have a numbers man report going forward here. We'll have that coming. No doubt about that. We will have that particular report, and of course the open source report. So we have a full weekend here, and I guess we'll do this a wrap. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth on the 7th of February 2020. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Week That Was. Good day.